Scientists attribute the global warming trend observed to the increase in the greenhouse effect, which is warming, that results when atmospheric gases trap heat radiating from the Earth towards space. Gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect include carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, water vapor, and chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs. The greenhouse effect is natural and is the reason our water remains liquid, for instance. However, human activities are changing the natural greenhouse through coal burning, clearing of land for agriculture, and industrialization. Global warming has eventually led to drastic changes in climate parameters, such as the melting of ice glaciers, heavy rain events that lead to floods, etc. Climate change in the Rwandan context requires limited technical research. This is due to its observable impacts comprising floods, landslides, unusual heat, and the dry spell observed every month, every season, and every year. And these events are most of the time associated with reduced agricultural harvest and loss of lives.
Rwanda is one of the 197 parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. So it was ratified in 1997, but again the subsequent Kyoto Protocol that was ratified by Rwandan government in 2004. In addition to that, Rwanda ratified the Paris Agreement. That was the climate talk took place in Paris that led to Paris Agreement back in 2015, but again Rwanda ratified the Paris Agreement in 2016. To add on that, further Rwanda hosted the Montreal Protocol, the 28th meeting of parties on Montreal Protocol. We call it MOP 28 here in Kigali, and again we ratified it in 2016. So that was commitment, and still a commitment that the government of Rwanda has really proved that is part of the climate negotiations and climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts globally. Actually, in all the institutions or in all the activities to alleviate climate change or to put up measures to fight climate change impacts, Rwanda has been in the forefront to implement some of the activities. Now I'm mentioning this to move from the paper-based commitments to the actions on the ground, where we have actually most of our institutions, meaning government institutions, ministries, have been putting in place different actions in different sectors to fight against climate change in the area of mitigation and adaptation. Examples we have implemented different renewable energy programs. We have actually worked on increasing the forest cover. That's part of adaptation and mitigation as well. In the area of agriculture, we have been working hard to implement irrigation projects. That's part of also of adaptation to climate change, and also agroforestry in that area of agriculture and beyond agriculture as well.
The main objective of the national communication process is to build local, individual, and institutional capacity to implement the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. The national communication process also seeks to enhance general awareness and knowledge on climate change-related issues in Rwanda and to assist in the process of national planning and policy formulation.
As a signatory, Rwanda is obliged to report on UNFCCC through national communication and biannual update reports. That is done every 4 years and 2 years. And this report actually that we are working on, and it has just been concluded, is a third national communication, of course following the initial and the second national communication report. The report has been funded by GEF, Global Environmental Facility, of course through UNEP, UN Environment, that is implementing agency for the GEF.
The inception workshop for the development of Rwanda's third national communication was held in January 2015, and since then, REMA has built a strong team of national experts who contributed to developing the Rwanda's third national communication. All reports went through a series of validation exercises at various stages of development of the final TNC report. A competent team of experts from stakeholder institutions participated keenly in these exercises and contributed to improving accuracy, validation of data, as well as comparison of results with national documentation. One of the major components of the third national communication is the National Greenhouse Gases Inventory. This is basically the quantification and reporting of greenhouse emissions and removals in various sectors in Rwanda. The National Greenhouse Gases Inventory was conducted on 4 sectors: energy use, industrial processes and product use, IPPU, agriculture, forestry and other land use, AFOLU, and waste. The estimation of greenhouse gases was conducted on a gas-by-gas basis, and estimates of the key sources, sensitivity analysis and uncertainty were provided. This chapter reveals that Rwanda is categorized as sink and not emitter. This means that although we do have more emissions coming from agriculture and energy, emissions removed by forestry and agroforestry are much more than those emitted.
Greenhouse gases emission and sinks were estimated for a period between 2006 to 2015, and 2006 IPCC guidelines were mainly used. So among the estimated emissions, we identify the main contributors to greenhouse gases. They include the forestry, chemical fertilizer, mainly the urea applications, the livestock farming, poorly managed soils, and road transportation. So if we consider the dynamics of greenhouse gases emission and sink, they are as follows. National total emission or removals, they rose from around minus 6 million tons of CO2 equivalent to more than minus 4.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So the annual change was estimated at 5.3%. So if you consider the emissions only without considering the removals, they rose from around 5 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2006 to more than 6.4 million tons of CO2 equivalent. So the average increase was estimated at 4.9%. So considering the removals only, they rose from minus more than 10 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 2006 to more than minus 11 tons of CO2 equivalent, with an annual average increase of 0.6%. So considering these numbers, Rwanda could be considered as a sink of greenhouse gases just because the removals are far higher than the emissions.
The analysis of emissions per sector shows that in 2015, the dominant emissions of Rwanda are from agriculture, with 70.4% of the national total emissions, followed by energy, 20.11%, waste, 7.55%, and the industrial processes and product use with 1.08%. The climate of Rwanda is regulated by both internal and external forcing. The internal forcing is mainly a list of factors including mountains, plains, forests, etc., while the major external forcing is the Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ. This chapter discusses the observed climate trends included in the chapter and elaborates on vulnerability and adaptation in the sectors of water resources, agriculture, livestock and forestry, energy, infrastructure and biodiversity, tourism and health.
Climate trend analysis right from 1961 to 2016 showed a significant increase in temperature and a decrease in rainfall, and also extreme events, weather events that are happening, that were observed in Rwanda, including, for example, floods, recurrent floods, and recurrent droughts. The highest temperature increase was in between 1.4 and 2.5 degrees Celsius of annual mean temperature in the southern and eastern region of Rwanda for a period of 46 years, meaning 1971 to 2016. The northern highlands experienced the lowest increase, which was in the range of 0.1 to 1.7 degrees Celsius. So if you look at the future trend, there is a decline between 1.5 and 2.5 days of rainy days by 2050.
The vulnerability of Rwanda's sectors to climate change is projected to increase with the projected impacts of climate change. To get a deep insight into Rwanda's vulnerability to climate change impacts, a vulnerability assessment and adaptation exercise was conducted. The chapter relates vulnerability and adaptation measures and indicates how this should be mainstreamed within relevant national policies and actions.
In the chapter about adaptation to climate change, the national communication, the third national communication, proposed in details climate adaptation changes strategies for the sector, different sectors of like the water sector, the aforo, which is the agriculture, forestry, and other land use, biodiversity and tourism and health, and energy and infrastructure. The strategies, for example, that we propose for the aforo sector include, for example, promotion of early yielding or drought resistant or short cycle crops and varieties. In this chapter we propose also mitigation, like on increasing investment in cutting-edge research in order to develop new varieties using molecular breeding techniques, and to develop varieties that are more responsive to biofertilizer and more efficient in nutrient use. Further development also of irrigation infrastructure and rainwater harvesting facilities were proposed. It was proposed also the promotion of biogas use in community and many public settlements like schools, health centers, and all other, even in prisons. We propose also a program on improved forest management and degraded forest resources. And we propose also the development of agroforestry or trees on farm.
This chapter provides details about mitigation assessment and abatement measures in the energy sector and the non-energy sector in Rwanda. Mitigation scenarios have been informed and aligned to the existing government sectorial policies, strategies, and programs. In order to ensure consistency, the level of emission reductions has also been aligned with the national targets outlined in the NDCs.
According to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, mitigation on climate change means that the reduction of the greenhouse gases emission compared to the baseline scenario, or which is also called called business as usual scenario. If you look at this business as usual scenario compared to the mitigation scenario, the country will be able to reduce up to 10 million carbon dioxide equivalent per year, which means that from the period 2021 up to 2050, we will be able to reduce more than 300 million of carbon dioxide equivalent for a period of 30 years, which is a lot for a country as Rwanda. So if you look in this report, among the mitigation options that are proposed, for instance, by starting with agriculture, which is the main emitter of greenhouse gases, you will find that there is the adoption of agroforestry, the use of agroforestry, the replacement of urea by less nitrogen volatile fertilizers, the development of hydropower, the use of methane gas from the Lake Kivu, the use of efficient equipment which use less energy, the use of waste as resources, and the composting, and so on.
The development of Rwanda's third national communication to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, demonstrates the country's willingness, being a responsible member of the global community, to seek and achieve global solutions on climate change.
The report actually is aligned with our National Development Plan documents. It is in line with the Low Carbon Development Strategy for the country. It is in line with the Vision 2050, the National Strategy for Transformation, and the National Determined Contributions. So we see it as a document that will be referred to by our policymakers and the other stakeholders as we develop our policies and strategies in the country. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our partners, government institutions, different ministries, civil societies, development partners, and all our partners in different areas that have been in one way or another very supportive to have this report produced. But in particular, I would like to thank our local and international experts that have been working very hard to have or to produce these national communication reports.